welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Miss Dollar, which is part of my novels collection. Single chapter. Single chapter, let's say, for the sake of the story, that I wanted to keep you guessing about who Miss Dollar really was. Maybe I thought it would build suspense or give the plot some depth. But honestly, if I kept her hidden for too long, I'd end up writing pages and pages of boring explanations, instead of just telling you what happened. So forget the mystery, let's meet Miss Dollar. Now, if you're the kind of reader who loves brooding heroes and tragic heroines, you might imagine Miss Dollar as a pale English girl with soft features and tired eyes. You'd picture her with delicate hands, long golden hair, and a voice like wind through trees. She'd be the type to read poetry in candlelight, speak only in whispers, and sip tea slowly while staring into the distance. Maybe she dreams of Shakespearean tragedies or quotes Tennyson from memory. If she ever tried Portuguese literature, she'd fall for Camões sonnets or Gonçalves Dias verses, reading them like prayers. Her life would feel dreamlike, fragile, like someone born not of flesh, but of moonlight and melancholy. And when she died, it wouldn't be death. Just a sigh fading into silence. But here is the thing that's not her. Now picture the opposite. Forget the poetic image. Let's say you're not into all that sad, dreamy stuff. Then Miss Dollar would look completely different. This time, think American. Strong. Full of life. Her cheeks are rosy, her laugh loud, her body built for living, not just existing. She eats well, really well, and enjoys every bite. A thick slice of roasted lamb means more to her than any poem. She doesn't waste time watching sunsets or crying over books. She's practical, warm, maybe even stubborn. She could run a house, raise a dozen kids, and still have energy left to argue politics at dinner. Some people might call her old-fashioned, the perfect wife and mother, exactly what certain so-called wise men expect from a woman. But don't let that fool you, she's real. Not made of dreams, but of fire and iron. She was the kind of dog that could make you stop and take a second look, even if you weren't usually the type to fall for animals. Miss Dollar, yes, that was really her name, had gone missing one chilly Tuesday night, slipping away while the city slept, and leaving behind nothing but silence and worry. If you'd been around back then, in Rio de Janeiro during those last months of 1885, you might have seen the posters nailed to street corners or read the ads printed bold in the newspapers. Desencaminhuse, uma cadelinha galga. The word spread fast, like gossip at a Sunday mass. Now imagine this, a little dog with soft ears and eyes that somehow looked both serious and sweet, trotting through the darkened streets of a city, still learning how to shine under gaslight. She wasn't just any dog, no. Not by a long shot. Miss Dollar wore a collar locked tight around her neck, engraved with the delicate letters of a French promise, de tout mon cœur. From all my heart. That alone would have made her memorable. But there was more. Some folks scratched their heads when they heard about the reward, 200,000 rei, enough to buy a decent horse or keep a family fed for months. And all for a lost dog. That didn't sit right with everyone. But then again, not many people knew the whole story. You see, Miss Dollar wasn't just a pet. She was something else entirely, a companion, a confidante, maybe even a symbol. And symbols have value, don't they? There were those who thought the whole thing was nonsense. A novel based on a lost dog. Come on now. But here is the truth. Some of the best stories come from the most unexpected places. Take it from me, I've read plenty. And believe it or not, this isn't just about a missing pup. It's about pride, love, money, and the strange ways they twist together when you're not looking. So picture it again, only this time slower. A small dog vanishing into the night, a collar with a secret message, and a city waking up to the sound of whispers. Because once Miss Dollar disappeared, everything changed. For her owner, for the people searching, and maybe even for the ones who never meant to get caught up in the chase. Every person in Rio de Janeiro who was desperate for 200 mil and happened to read that out went out that day walking with extra care, eyes peeled, hoping to spot the runaway Miss Dollar. Any dog that appeared in the distance was chased down with stubborn determination until it became clear it wasn't the one they were looking for. But all this frantic hunt for the reward was completely pointless, because the very day the ad came out, Miss Dollar had already found shelter inside the house of a man living in Cajueros who happened to collect dogs. What exactly moved Dr. Mendonça to build such a collection of dogs was anyone's guess. Some believed he simply had a deep passion for these animals, symbols of loyalty or submission. Others thought that, deeply disappointed by people, he had decided it was better to pour his affection into dogs. Whatever the reason, no one else owned a more beautiful or diverse set of dogs than he did. He had every breed, size, and color imaginable. He treated them like they were his own children if one died. Head fall into melancholy. You could almost say that, in Mendonça's mind, a dog mattered as much as love itself, echoing a famous phrase, "Take dogs out of the world, and the world becomes a desert." A careless reader might jump to the conclusion that Mendonça was some kind of eccentric. But he really wasn't. He was just a regular guy who happened to love dogs the way others love flowers. For him, dogs were like roses and violets. He cared for them with the same attention and care. He liked flowers too, but only when they were still growing. Cutting a jasmine or caging a canary felt like the same cruel mistake to him. Dr. Mendonça was about 34 years old, good-looking with open and refined manners. Mendonça was a doctor by training, and for a while he actually worked treating patients. His practice was going well when an outbreak hit the city. That's when he came up with a special potion to fight the illness. And it worked so well, in fact, that he made a small fortune from it. After that, he didn't need to work medicine full-time anymore. He had more than enough to live comfortably, not just for himself, but for his family too. Only thing was, his family wasn't exactly human. On the unforgettable night, Miss Dollar got lost. Mendonça was walking home when he spotted her wandering near Rocio. She started following him like she already knew him. Not seeing anyone around who looked after her, he decided to take her in. Back at his house in Cajueros, he gave her a good look over. She was a real beauty slam, elegant, with soft brown eyes that looked like they held all the peace in the world. You could tell, just by looking at her, that someone had loved her very much. He checked the tag on her collar and realized she must be dearly missed by whoever owned her. If no one comes for her, she stays, he said quietly, handing Miss Dollar over to the boy who looked after his dogs. The boy gave her food while Mendonça imagined a bright future for his new Gaston, where she'd have puppies and her line would live on in his home. But dreams don't last long sometimes. The next morning, as he flipped through the newspaper, there it was. A reward of 200,000 rei for anyone who returned the missing dog. Reading that, Mendonça understood the pain the owner must be feeling. Offering that much money meant this wasn't just a petit, was family. And so, with a heavy heart, he made up his mind to give her back. Mendonça paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. But in the end, his honest and kind nature won out. It was just who he was. And since saying goodbye to the dog, still so new to his home, felt too hard, he decided to take Miss Dollar back himself. He made plans to do just that. After lunch, and only after making sure Miss Dollar had eaten too, the two of them left the house heading toward Mata-Cavalos. Back then, the Barano do Amazonas hadn't yet become a hero of the Platina Republics, with his victory at Riachuelo, a name the city council would later give to Mata-Cavalos Street. So for now, it was still called by its old confusing name that didn't really mean anything to anyone. The house they were looking for stood out. It looked nice, solid, and suggested whoever lived there was doing just fine. Even before Mendonça could clap his hands in the hallway, Miss Dollar recognized the place. She began jumping with joy, letting out cheerful, throaty barks. If dogs had literature, that sound would have been a hymn of gratitude. A young boy came to see who was there. Mendonça told him he had come to return the lost greyhound. The boy's face lit up, and he ran off to spread the good news. Meanwhile, Miss Dollar took advantage of a small opening and darted up the stairs. Mendonça was just about to turn back, thinking his job was done, when the boy returned and told him to go up and enter the sitting room. The room was empty. Some people like to leave their guests alone for a while, when they arrive, letting them admire the space before coming to greet them. Maybe that was the habit here, but this time, it didn't happen. As soon as Mendonça entered through the hallway door, a lady came out from an inner room, Miss Dollar in her arms and a smile on her face. "Please, have a seat," she said, pointing to a chair. "She's been gone such a short time," said the doctor, sitting down. "I've come to bring her back. Miss Dollar has been with me since yesterday." "You can't imagine the worry her absence caused at home," replied the old lady. "Oh, I can imagine, madam. I myself am fond of dogs, and if I lost one, I'd feel it deeply." "You're Miss Dollar." "Pardon me," she interrupted. "She's not mine. Miss Dollar belongs to my niece." "I see. She's on her way now." Mendonça stood up just as the niece entered the room. She looked about 28, in the full bloom of her beauty, a woman whose charm promised a late but dignified old age. Her dark silk dress set off strikingly the pale whiteness of her skin. The dress was rustling, which gave her an even more majestic presence. Its bodice covered her completely, yet beneath the silk one could guess the shape of a torso as perfect as marble carved by divine hands. Her brown hair, naturally wavy, was styled simply, in that homely fashion which is perhaps the most elegant of all. It framed her forehead like a crown given by nature itself. Her skin was extremely fair, though without the faintest hint of pink to soften its tone or create contrast. Her mouth was small, and wore a certain air of command. But what truly stood out in that face, what drew the eye most irresistibly, were her eyes. Picture 2 emeralds floating in milk. Mendonça had never seen green eyes before. People had told him they existed, and he even knew by heart some famous verses by Gonçalves Dias that mentioned them. But until then, green eyes were to him no more real than the mythical phoenix. One day, while chatting with friends about this very subject, he had declared firmly that if he ever came across a pair of green eyes, he would run from them in terror. Why? One of the listeners had asked in surprise. "Green is the color of the sea," answered Mendonça. "I avoid storms in one, and ill avoid storms in others too. I leave it to the reader's judgment to decide how peculiar this may seem, but it's a peculiarity worth noting, in the true spirit of Molière." Mendonça greeted the newly arrived lady with a respectful bow, and she, with a gentle gesture, invited him to sit again. "I'm deeply grateful for bringing back this poor creature, who means so much to me," said Margarita as she sat down. "And I thank God for letting me find her," replied Mendonça. "She could have fallen into hands that wouldn't have returned her." Margarita made a small gesture toward Miss Dollar, and the little dog, jumping from the old woman's lap, ran straight to her. The animal stood on her hind legs, placing her front paws gently on Margarita's knees. The two exchanged a long, affectionate gaze. During all this, Margarita's hand absent-mindedly played with one of the greyhound's ears, giving Mendonça the perfect chance to admire her beautiful fingers, adorned with sharp, delicate nails. Though he was more than happy to be there, Mendonça began to feel uneasy. He realized his presence might seem odd, even awkward. It could look like he was waiting for some kind of reward. To avoid that misunderstanding, he decided to cut short the pleasure of the conversation and the joy of simply watching her. He rose slowly and said, "My mission here is complete." But interrupted the old woman. Mendonça understood right away what she meant. "The joy I've brought to this house is the greatest reward I could ever wish for," he said. "And now, if you'll allow me." The two women caught his meaning immediately. Margarita responded with a sweet smile, while the old woman, summoning every bit of strength left in her fragile body, squeezed his hand warmly before letting go. As he stepped outside, Mendonça couldn't stop thinking about Margarita. Her beauty was undeniable, striking, but it was her quiet sadness and that serious, almost distant look in her eyes and manner that really stayed with him. To him, her personality seemed to match perfectly with the calm and thoughtful nature of a doctor. If it was shaped by some past experience, then it was a chapter in her story waiting to be read by someone who knew how to look closely. Truth be told, the only flaw Mendonça could find in her was the color of her eyes, not because green was an ugly color, but because he had a strange bias against green eyes. And this bias, to be clear, came more from his love of words than anything else. He had once said something about green eyes, a line that stuck with him, and now it colored everything he felt. Don't jump to conclusions just yet. Mendonça wasn't some foolish man ruled by silly ideas. He was smart, well-read, and full of common sense. He also had a deep, romantic heart. But like all men, even heroes, he had his weak spot. You could say he was like Achilles' heel was his weakness. And in those days, there were plenty of other so-called Achilles walking around with nothing but heels, and no strength at all. This was his fault line. He let a poetic idea get in the way of real feelings. He could throw away a whole relationship for the sake of a nicely written sentence. Talking to a friend about the Greyhound episode and his meeting with Margarita, he admitted that he might fall for her if only she didn't have green eyes. His friend laughed, half amused, half sarcastic. "But doctor," he said, "I really don't get this prejudice. I've even heard people say that green eyes often belong to kind souls." He went on, "Besides, eye color doesn't mean much. What matters is their expression. Eyes can be blue as the sky and still be as deceitful as the sea." That comment, coming from an unnamed friend, was as poetic as anything Mendonça had ever said. And it shook him deeply. He didn't end up frozen like Buridan's donkey, stuck between a bucket of water and a bag of oats. The donkey might hesitate, but Mendonça didn't. He quickly remembered the lesson from the old moralist Sanchez, and chose the opinion that made the most sense to him. Some serious reader might think this whole thing about green eyes and the debate over their meaning is childish, maybe even silly. Mendonça wasn't someone who knew the world very well. You could say he was a bit naive, maybe even predictable. People like him are always looking for something bigger, something romantic, while missing what's right in front of them. If you've ever read those illustrated almanacs full of stories about great memoir heroes, famous thinkers, you know that even the most admired figures had their quirks, their flaws. And yet, we still admire them. So why should Mendonça be any different? Let's just accept him as he is, a man with dreams too big for his own good and weaknesses that make him human. Who doesn't have flaws? Maybe that's just how people are. When they start sailing through life, they carry some kind of weight inside, something that keeps them from floating away. Some folks don't even realize they're carrying it. Still, Mendonça wasn't all fantasy and foolishness. He had qualities, real ones, things that made him stand out. When he finally decided to follow his friend's advice and thing, he rarely did. He started thinking that maybe, just maybe, Margarita held the key to everything he wanted. That thought stayed with him. He imagined a life with her. A house by the sea, somewhere quiet, facing west so they could watch the sun dip into the ocean. They'd be married, legally and spiritually, living quietly together, sipping happiness drop by drop. His dream had more details, little things that filled his mind and gave him comfort. But he'll skip those for now. For days he walked around thinking about this future. He even passed by Matacavalos a few times, hoping to see her. But luck wasn't on his side. He never managed to run into Margarita or her aunt. After trying again and again without success, he gave up. Just like that. Back home, he returned to his dogs. Yes, his dogs. And not just any dogs, each one had a name, a story, a kind of importance. His favorite was Diogenes, calm and wise-looking. There was a greyhound named Caesar, fast and proud. A water dog called Nelson, loyal and strong. A small terrier, Cornelia, clever and alert. And then there was Caligula, huge and intimidating, like a Roman emperor brought back to life. When he was with them, Mendonça felt like he was walking through history itself. Surrounded by these characters, each with their own personality, he forgot about everything else. The world outside didn't matter anymore. In his own strange way, he found peace among his pack. Mendonça was standing outside Carcelar's, where he had just finished an ice cream with a friend, when something caught his eye. A carriage rolled past, and inside it sat two ladies who looked oddly familiar. Something in their posture, maybe the way one of them tilted her head, made him stop mid-sentence. His friend noticed right away. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing," Mendonça replied, brushing it off. "I just thought I recognized those women." "Did you get a good look, Andrade?" "No," said Andrade, shrugging. By then, the carriage had turned into Rua do Ouvidor. Without thinking much of it, the two men followed, walking at a leisurely pace. Just past Rua da Quitanda, the carriage came to a halt in front of a shop, and the women stepped out and went inside. Mendonça didn't see them leave, but he kept his eyes on the carriage and felt sure it was the same one. He picked up his pace slightly, not saying a word. Andrade did the same. Curious now himself, there's always something magnetic about the sense that someone is hiding something. A few moments later, they were both standing in front of the shop. Mendonça peeked through the window and saw them, no doubt about it. It really was the Matacavalos ladies. He walked in like a man with a purpose, pretending he was there to buy something. As he approached them, the aunt was the first to recognize him. He greeted them politely, and they responded warmly. Beside Margarita stood Miss Dollar, who, with that uncanny instinct some people have, the kind you usually only see in dogs or social climbers, immediately jumped up twice in excitement when she spotted Mendonça. Her front paws even tapped lightly against his stomach. "She seems to remember you fondly," Donna Antonia said with a smile. That was her name, Margarita's aunt. "I think she does," he replied, gently petting the little greyhound while sneaking a glance at Margarita. Just then, Andrade walked in behind him. "I only just placed you," he said, turning to the ladies. He shook hands with Donna Antonia and gave Margarita's fingers a light squeeze. Mendonça hadn't expected this, but he couldn't help feeling pleased. This chance encounter might just give him the perfect opportunity to turn what had so far been a polite, distant acquaintance into something much more personal. "Well," he said to Andrade, "it would be nice if you introduced me to these ladies." "You don't know them?" Andrade asked, surprised. "You could say he knows us without really knowing us," the old aunt replied. "For now, consider that Miss Dollar has already introduced you." Antonia told Andrade about the lost and found little dog. "In that case," Andrade responded, "he'll introduce you right away." Once the formalities were done, the clerk brought Margarita the items she had bought, and the two ladies said goodbye to the young men, inviting them to visit. I didn't mention any of Margarita's words in the conversation above because, truth be told, the girl only said 2 words to each of them. "Goodbye," she said, offering the tips of her fingers before stepping out and into the carriage. Once alone, the 2 young men also left and walked up Rua do Ouvidor, both silent. Mendonça was thinking about Margarita. Andrade was thinking about how to become Mendonça's confidant. Vanity wears as many masks as the mythical Proteus himself. Andrade's version of vanity was being someone's trusted friend. It made him feel like he earned secrets through trust, when in reality he only got them through loose tongues. It wasn't hard for him to uncover Mendonça's secret. Before they even reached the corner of Rua dos Ourives, Andrade already knew everything. You understand now, Mendonça finally said, that I need to go to her house. I have to see her again. I want to try. Mendonça paused mid-step. Go on, Andrade encouraged. Say it, what if you end up loved by her? Why not? But let me warn you, it won't be easy. Why not? Because Margarita has already turned down 5 marriage proposals. Probably because she didn't love any of them, Mendonça replied, sounding like a mathematician solving an equation. She was deeply in love with the first, Andrade corrected, and definitely not indifferent to the last one either. There must have been some interference then. No, nothing like that. You're surprised? That's exactly what happened to me. She's just strange, a peculiar girl. He looked at her as if she were the last star in a sky full of clouds. If you feel strong enough to be the Columbus of this new world, then set sail into the unknown with your fleet, but watch out for mutiny from within, because passions are wild sailors on this kind of voyage. Andrade's eyes lit up after saying that. He liked metaphors drawn from history, especially when they sounded poetic. He glanced at Mendonça, who, this time, was clearly distracted by thoughts of the young woman and didn't even notice his friend's clever line. Andrade didn't mind. He was happy enough, just hearing himself speak. He smiled the way a writer might after finishing the final sentence of a long novel. A few days later, both men paid a visit to Margarita's house. They stayed for about half an hour, exchanging polite conversation. More visits followed, though it was mostly Mendonça who kept showing up. Andrade came along now and then, but not nearly as often. Donna Antonia, the mother, seemed more open and warm than her daughter, who remained distant and quiet, like someone watching life from behind a window. But eventually, even Margarita began to soften. It wasn't easy to stay cold with someone like Mendonça around. Though he wasn't known for enjoying social gatherings, he had a charm that could melt ice. A doctor by trade, he played piano beautifully, and carried himself like a man who knew how to talk to women, not with deep philosophical ideas or historical debates, but with humor, ease, and small talk that made them feel seen. It didn't take him long to become part of their world. Later, after those first visits, Mendonça learned from Andrade that Margarita was actually a widow. His face showed surprise before his words did. But you spoke of her as if she were single, he said to his friend. I suppose I didn't make myself clear, Andrade admitted. All the marriage proposals she turned down came after her husband passed. How long has she been a widow? 3 years now. Mendonça stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. That explains everything, he finally said. She wants to remain faithful to his memory. She's one of those rare souls like Artemis in the modern age. Mendonça didn't buy the idea of eternal love. Not really. He smiled at his friend's comment, and when the other insisted, he simply shrugged. But I already told you, he said. She loved her first suitor passionately, and wasn't cold to the last one either. Then I don't get it. Neither do I. From that moment on, Mendonça decided to try his luck with the widow. At first, Margarita looked at him with such clear indifference, no, worse than that, with a kind of cold mockery that he almost gave up. But even though she seemed to reject his affection, she never denied him kindness. Whenever he looked at her like any other man would, she responded with the sweetest warmth imaginable. Rejected love, as everyone knows, only grows stronger. Every time she turned him down, his feelings grew deeper. He no longer paid attention to the fierce Caligula or the elegant Julio Caesar. Those two slaves who had served him for years began to notice how different he had become. His old habits were gone. He was distracted, restless. They assumed something was troubling him, and they were right. One day, when he came home lost in thought, he kicked the dog by accident. Cornelia, a little dog with a noble air and mother of two small mutts, was jumping around him, happy to see him back. He didn't even notice her. Andrade, his closest friend, wasn't blind to all this. He tried to comfort Mendonça the best he could. In cases like this, comfort is always appreciated, even when it changes nothing. Mendonça listened to every word, but still carried the same pain in his chest. Andrade suggested a solution. Leave the house for a while. Distance, he said, might help you forget. Mendonça smiled and quoted La Rochefoucauld. Absence weakens small passions and strengthens the great ones, like wind that puts out candles but feeds the flames. That line silenced Andrade completely. He didn't really believe in lasting love or in women like Margarita, but he also didn't want to argue with a French philosopher, with a man so deeply in love. So, 3 months passed like that. Mendonça kept visiting, even though he never seemed to move their relationship forward. But the widow was always kind to him, never cold, never dismissive. That, more than anything, kept him coming back. He clung to the hope that one day, she might finally return his feelings. Now, some readers might wonder why he didn't just walk away from a woman whose reputation wasn't exactly spotless. After all, people talked Dona Margarita had her admirers, and tongues wagged. But Mendonça had an excuser at least. He thought he did. Her son was always around him. Jorge, as he was called, was the apple of his mother's eye, even if he didn't have much else going for him. The boy spent like a king without earning a penny, thanks to his mother's endless generosity. Jorge passed his days in barbershops, spending more time getting his hair done than most women of fashion. He never missed a big show at the Alcázar Theater, rode fine horses, and made it a point to spend lavishly on the city's more colorful socialites, ladies, and hangers-on alike. His gloves were E-sized, his boots a delicate 36 fax. He made sure every friend with larger hands and simpler tastes knew full well. With Jorge always underfoot, Mendonça told himself there was nothing improper about his visits. He imagined that having the young man around somehow cleared his name in the eyes of society, so-called public opinion of the town's gossiping idlers. But let's be honest, would that really shut them up? As for Margarita, she seemed completely indifferent to what people said. She didn't care about rumors, or even Mendonça's constant presence. Or at least that's how it looked. Was she really indifferent to everything? No, not at all. She loved her mother deeply, adored Miss Dollar like family, had a soft spot for classical music, and devoured novels when she had the time. She dressed well, but not obsessively. She didn't waltz, though she'd join a square dance now and then at the soiree she attended. She wasn't talkative, but when she spoke, she chose her words carefully and well. Her movements were graceful, lively even, but never forced, never trying too hard to impress. And when Mendonça showed up at her house, she welcomed him with genuine delight. Mendonça always let himself hope, even though he should have known better by now. Margarita enjoyed his company, there was no doubt about that, but she treated him like a nice day. Pleasant to have around, but not something you'd miss terribly if it went away. He couldn't keep living like this. One night, after mustering courage he didn't know he had, he finally asked her something he had no right to ask. "Were you happy with your husband?" She frowned, surprised, and stared straight into his eyes, as if trying to read the unspoken thoughts behind his words. After a long pause, she answered simply, "Yes." That single word hit him harder than he expected. He hadn't prepared for that reply. He had believed in the closeness between them, trusted it too much maybe. He wanted to understand why she seemed so indifferent, so untouched by his feelings. But his attempt backfired. Margarita grew quiet, distant for a while. And just when things started getting awkward, Donna Antonia arrived and broke the tension. Not long after, Margarita returned to her usual self, warm and talkative, and the conversation flowed again like it always did. But when Jorge entered the room, the mood changed completely. The moment he walked in, everything became livelier. Donna Antonia watched her son with the pride only a mother could feel, convinced he was the most charming young man alive. And maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. Jorge certainly acted like he was. He filled the space with stories, jokes, and impressions from the Alcázar, never letting silence settle. Mendonça listened quietly, tolerating Jorge's chatter with a kind of patient resignation. The young man's arrival made the evening fly by, and soon it was 10 o'clock. Mendonça stood to leave, and Jorge offered to walk him to dinner. Mendonça politely declined, and said goodbye on Rua do Conde, at the corner of Rua do Lavradio. That same night, walking home alone under the gaslights, he made up his mind. He would write her a letter, a final, decisive move. He was a bold man. Anyone who knew the widow's nature would have said so, but, with the history between them, it was pure madness. Still, the doctor didn't hesitate to write her a letter, convinced that paper could say what words never could. He wrote it feverishly, almost desperately. The next day, right after lunch, Mendonça slipped the letter inside a book by George Sand and sent it over with the houseboy. The widow unwrapped the package, placed the book on the living room table, and went about her day. Half an hour later she returned and picked up the book to read. As soon as she opened it, the letter fell at her feet. She picked it up, unfolded it, and began reading. "Whatever the reason for your distance, I respect it, don't fight against it. But if I can bring myself to rebel, may I at least be allowed to complain. You must already know how deeply I love you, just as I understand your indifference. Yet no matter how cold your heart may be, it still falls short of matching the powerful, overwhelming love that has taken hold of my love I thought I had left behind in my youth. I won't tell you about the sleepless nights or the tears, the hopes and disappointments, the sad pages of this book that fate places in every man's hands, meant for two souls to read together. All of this means nothing to you. I don't dare ask why you've kept away from me, but why does this withdrawal extend to everyone else too? In the prime of life, blessed with rare beauty, why choose to hide from the world and deny nature and the heart their rightful place? Forgive my audacity in asking. I stand before a mystery my heart longs to solve. Sometimes I wonder if some great sorrow haunts you, and if so, I'd gladly be the one to heal your pain. I admit, I dreamed of bringing back some lost illusion for you. Surely there's no harm in such a wish. Mendonça hesitated, but not out of arrogance. If that's what it seemed like, he asked her to forgive him for writing when her eyes had clearly told him not to. She could tear the letter up, it wasn't worth keeping as a memory, or being used against him. The letter was full of thought. Its words were cold and distant, failing to show the fire he truly felt. Still, any reader would notice how honest and simple Mendonça had been when asking for an explanation that Margarita likely couldn't give. When he told Andrade that he had written to Margarita, the doctor's friend began to laugh loudly. "Did I do something wrong?" Mendonça asked. "You ruined everything," Andrade replied. "The other suitors started with letters too. That's exactly what killed their chances." Mendonça shrugged, pretending not to care. "If that's what happens, then so be it. But I wish you wouldn't always bring up the other suitors. I'm not like them." "Don't you want to marry her?" Andrade asked. "Of course, if possible," Mendonça answered. "Well, that's what they all wanted too. You'd get married and quietly take possession of her fortune, which is worth well over 100 contos. Listen, my friend, I mentioned the suitors not to hurt you. One of those 4 who got turned down was me." "You?" "It's true. But don't worry, I wasn't the first, or even the last." "Did you write to her too?" "Just like the others. And just like them, I never got a reply. Or rather, I did. She sent mine back unopened. So since you wrote, now wait for what comes next," Andrade continued. "You'll see if I'm right. You're done, Mendonça. You made a big mistake." Andrade had a habit of never hiding the darkest parts of any situation, claiming that honesty was what friends deserved. After painting that bleak picture, he said goodbye and walked away. Mendonça went home and stayed awake all night, unable to stop thinking about what his friend had said. Mendonça was wrong. The widow replied to his letter, though not in the way he had hoped. Her response was short and final. "I forgive you for everything. I won't forgive you if you write to me again. My hesitation has no reason, it's just my nature." The tone was even colder than her words. He read it over and over, trying to find a hidden meaning, but there was nothing more to find. Still, he drew 2 conclusions right away. First, that some invisible wall kept Margarita from accepting him. Second, that she might forgive another letter if he dared to send one. When Mendonça visited Matacavallos for the first time after the letter, he wasn't sure how to act around her. But Margarita made it easy. She treated him like nothing had ever happened between them. That day, Donna Antonia stayed close, so he never got the chance to mention the letters. Honestly, he was relieved. He didn't know what he would say if they were alone. But a few days later, he wrote again. Same handwriting, same feelings, different envelope. He sent it through the same person as before. And again, silence. The letter came back untouched, with no reply. That was when regret hit him. He shouldn't have ignored her wishes. He decided then and there he wouldn't go back to her house. Not because he didn't want to, but because it hurt too much. He couldn't stand being near someone he loved so deeply, knowing she wouldn't love him back. A month passed. His feelings hadn't changed at all. If anything, they'd grown stronger. Absence didn't cool his heart, it fanned it like wind on fire. He tried to distract himself, reading or going out into the busy life of Rio de Janeiro. Once, he even started writing a paper about ear anatomy. But his pen kept slipping from science into emotion. The result was something between a medical study and a love letter. At the time, Renan's novel about the life of Jesus was all the rage. Mendonça filled his study with every pamphlet and translation he could find. He buried himself in the mystery of Judea, hoping ancient history would quiet his modern pain. It didn't. But at least it gave him something else to think about, even if only for a little while. Mendonça tried everything to forget her, really he did. He wanted to clear his head, to stop thinking about Margarita. But it was impossible. She was always there, in the back of his mind, like a song you can't get rid of. One morning, Jorge showed up at his house. He was the son of Dona Antonia, and had come for two reasons: to ask why Mendonça hadn't been around Matacavallos lately, and to show off his brand new pair of trousers. Mendonça gave the trousers a quick look and nodded with approval. Then he made up some excuse about being busy with work. Jorge wasn't the type to read between the lines. He couldn't see the pain hiding behind Mendonça's calm words. Seeing all the books and papers around, he even asked if Mendonça was studying to become a congressman. Can you believe that? Jorge actually thought you needed to study hard to be a politician. No, said Mendonça with a small smile. In fact, your cousin reads just as much, and I don't think she wants to go to Congress either. My cousin? Jorge replied, surprised. That's right, Mendonça went on. And you wouldn't believe how much she reads. She locks herself in her room and spends whole days with her books. Hearing this, Mendonça started to imagine things. Maybe Margarita was one of those women who lived for knowledge, perhaps even a modest poetess, someone who found comfort in the muses instead of in the arms of men. But this idea came from nothing more than a heart blinded by love. There are many reasons to read a lot without ever meeting a muse. Oh, she never used to read this much, Jorge added. Now she just won't stop. As he spoke, Jorge pulled out a fine Cuban cigar from his case, one worth 3 coins, and offered another to Mendonça. Smoke this, he said, and then tell me if anyone has better cigars than Bernardo's. They smoked together. After the cigars were done, Jorge said goodbye, happy to leave, with the promise that Mendonça would soon visit Dona Antonia's house again. About 15 days later, Mendonça returned to Matacavallos. When he walked into the sitting room, Andrade and Dona Antonia welcomed him like he was coming back from the grave. In truth, he looked like it too. He had lost weight and looked pale. A deep sadness filled his face, giving him an air of quiet suffering. He blamed it on long hours of work and tried his best to seem cheerful, chatting and smiling as he used to. But inside, he still carried the same heavy heart. Mendonça had been pretending to be happy, but it was obvious to anyone paying attention that his cheerfulness was fake. After about 15 minutes, his face fell back into sadness. Margarita hadn't come into the room the whole time, and something about her absence made Mendonça finally ask almost without meaning to off anything was wrong with her. Dona Antonia told him that Margarita wasn't feeling quite herself. That not quite herself lasted about 3 days. It was just a bad headache, or so her cousin believed, probably from reading too much. But then, a few days later, Donna Antonia was surprised when Margarita suddenly said she wanted to leave the city and spend some time in the countryside. "Are you tired of the city?" Donna Antonia asked gently. "Something like that," Margarita replied. "I'd like to spend 2 months out there." Donna Antonia didn't have the heart or the will to say no to her niece. She agreed to the trip, and the two began making plans. Mendonça found out about the change while walking around the Rocio late one night, just as he was heading to the Alcázar with his friend Jorge. For Mendonça, the news was a gift. It meant he no longer had to keep up the one annoying habit he still had, going to dinner with his mother. He didn't think much of Margarita's decision. Lately, her choices had started to feel childish to him. When he got home, he found a note from Donna Antonia waiting for him. "Well, be leaving the city for a few months. I hope you won't forget to say goodbye. We leave on Saturday, and I'd like to ask you for a favor." Mendonça poured himself some tea and tried to get ready for bed. He couldn't sleep. He tried to read, but his mind wouldn't focus. It was still early, so he decided to go out. Before he realized it, his feet had taken him to Mata-Cavalos. Donna Antonia's house was closed and quiet, clearly already asleep. Mendonça walked past it and stopped near the iron gate of the garden next to the house. From there, he could see Margarita's bedroom window. It was low to the ground and faced the garden. The light was on inside. She was still awake. Mendonça walked a few more steps, the garden gate swinging open just enough to let him see through. His heart pounded in his chest like a wild drum. A strange suspicion crept into his mind. Even the most confident heart knows moments of doubt. Was he wrong to feel this way? But then again, could his feeling be right at all? He had no claim over the widow. Had been turned down, plainly and clearly. If there was any duty he owed, it was to step back and stay quiet. He wanted to respect the limits set for him. The open gate might just be carelessness from the servants. The doctor told himself it was all coincidence. He tried to turn away, really tried. But something inside him pushed him back, like a whisper only he could hear. Against his better judgment, he went back and slipped through the gate, careful not to make a sound. He hadn't gone far when Miss Dollar appeared, barking fiercely. The little dog must have come out without anyone noticing. Mendonça crouched and reached out, speaking softly. To his surprise, the dog stopped barking and began wagging her tail, as if remembering him. Inside the house, a shadow appeared on the wall of Margarita's room. It was the widow, drawn to the window by the noise. Mendonça pressed himself against the bushes near the fence, hiding as best he could. After a moment, seeing no one, Margarita turned away. A few minutes passed. Mendonça stepped out from his hiding spot and moved quietly toward the widow's window. Miss Dollar followed close behind. From the garden floor he couldn't see much, though he was tall. The window was too high. But the little dog knew the way. She darted ahead, hopping up a short stone staircase that led from the garden to the house. At the top was a hallway, and at the end of it, Margarita's door left ajar. Mendonça followed her, step by careful step. As he reached the top, he heard Miss Dollar leap into the room and bark at the door, as if warning Margarita of someone's approach. He took one more step forward. Mendonça was still pacing the garden path when the little dog started barking again. A slave came running from the house, clearly annoyed at the noise. He looked around, saw nothing out of place, and turned back toward the house with a shrug. From her bedroom window, Miss Dollar leaned out just enough to ask what all the fuss was about. The slave told her there was no problem, that everything was quiet. She nodded, pulled the window shut, and stepped away. Just then, as if appearing from nowhere, Mendonça stood in the doorway. Margarita froze. Her face went pale, her hands trembling slightly against the fabric of her dress. She didn't move for a second, just stared at him like she was seeing something she wished she hadn't. Then, gathering every bit of strength she had, she asked, voice shaking but sharp, "What are you doing here?" It was only in that moment, standing under her gaze, that he fully understood how wrong his actions were. Not just wrong, pathetic. He felt like a fool caught in the act, exposed not by anyone else, but by her. By the look in her eyes. He didn't try to lie or make excuses. His words came out simple, honest. "I know what I did was awful," he said. "I had no reason to come here. I wasn't thinking straight. He was out of my mind. Now I see exactly how much damage I've done. I won't ask for your forgiveness, Dona Margarita. I don't deserve it. I deserve your contempt. Goodbye." She studied him for a long moment before answering. "I understand, sir," she replied coldly. "You want to force me into submission through scandal, since love never worked. That's not the behavior of a gentleman." "No, no," he insisted. "That was never my intention. I swear it." Suddenly overcome with emotion, Margarita sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking. It looked like she was crying. Mendonça took a step forward, almost forgetting himself, nearly crossing the threshold. But then she lifted her tear-filled eyes and pointed firmly toward the hallway. Without another word, he left. Neither of them slept that night. Both were crushed under the weight of shame. But if one could measure guilt, Mendonça's would tip the scale heavier than hers. And though she hurt, his pain was sharper, deeper in ache that wouldn't fade so easily. The next morning, Mendonça sat alone in his room, smoke curling through the air from one cigar after another, each puff an attempt to drown his thoughts. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels on gravel stopped in front of his house. Moments later, Jorg's mother stepped down from the carriage and walked up to the door. Mendonça had a bad feeling about the visit before Donna Antonia even arrived. But as soon as she walked in, something about her presence eased his worry. She was old-fashioned in the way she spoke and moved, but there was warmth in her eyes that made him feel, at least for a moment, less alone. "I suppose," she began, settling into the chair he offered with the ease of someone who'd been welcomed 100 times before, "that at my age, I'm allowed to drop by on a bachelor like you." He tried to smile at her joke, but his face wouldn't cooperate. He sat across from her, folding his hands nervously on his lap. "I wrote to you yesterday," she continued, "asking you to come see me today. But I decided it was better if I came here instead. I was afraid something might keep you from going all the way to Matacavallos." Mendonça leaned forward slightly. "So you wanted to ask me something?" "Oh, not at all," she said, smiling again, this time with a hint of mischief. "I didn't call you for anything importante, just wanted to tell you something." "Tell me what?" he asked, now genuinely curious. Well, she paused, almost theatrical in her timing. Do you know who stayed in bed today? Donna Margarita, he guessed. That's right, she confirmed. She woke up, feeling unwell. Said she didn't sleep well last night. And I think I know why, she added, looking at him with an expression that made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. What do you mean? He asked, frowning. You don't see it? She replied, tilting her head. No, he said, shaking his own. She loves you, she finally said. Mendonça shot up from his chair like he'd been startled awake. The words hit him so hard they seemed to echo in the room. Love me? He repeated, still standing. Yes, Donna Antonia said again calmly. Don't believe it. There was silence between them, heavy and full of questions. It must be a mistake, he said after a while. A mistake? She echoed, amused. Is that really what you think? Then she told him everything. She admitted she had been curious about Margarita's recent behavior, how distracted she seemed, how often she stared out the window or paced the house without saying a word. Out of concern or perhaps simple nosiness, she had looked through her niece's things and found a small notebook filled with thoughts and feelings, clearly written in secret. It was clear from the pages that Margarita carried something deep inside her heart, love for Mendonça. But if she loves me, he said slowly, sitting back down now, why does she keep turning me away? Why won't she accept my feelings? Donna Antonia nodded, as if expecting the question. The diary answers that too, she explained. From what I read, Margarita was deeply hurt in her marriage. Her husband only wanted her money. He never loved her, not truly. Because of that, she believes no one ever will. Not for who she really is. She thinks your affection comes from the same place, greed. The words hung in the air. Mendonça stared at the floor, letting them sink in. For the first time in a long while, something inside him stirred not just hope, but the kind of hope that feels dangerous, because it might actually come true. Mendonça still hadn't convinced her. He started to protest, but Donna Antonia cut him short. It's useless, she said. I believe in your sincere affection. I've known that for a long time. But how do you convince a suspicious heart? I don't know. Neither do I, the old woman replied. That's exactly why I came here. Please, help my Margarita find happiness again. Make her believe in your love for her. I think it's impossible. For a moment, Mendonça considered telling Donna Antonia about what had happened the night before. But he stopped himself just in time. She left shortly after, leaving him alone with his thoughts. His situation had become clearer, yes, but much harder than before. Maybe there was something he could do before that scene in the bedroom. But now, after everything, he couldn't see any way forward. Margarita stayed ill for 2 days. On the third morning, she got up looking pale and tired. The first thing she did was write to Mendonça, asking him to come over. He was surprised by the invitation, but went right away. After what happened 3 days ago, she told him, "You must understand I can't live under the weight of gossip. You say you love me. Then our marriage is unavoidable." The word unavoidable stuck in his mind like a bitter taste. Still, he couldn't refuse to make things right. At the same time, he remembered, she truly loved him. And although that thought brought him joy, it was quickly replaced by the pain of knowing she doubted him. "I'm at your service," he answered. Donna Antonia was shocked at how fast the wedding came together. When Margarita told her the news that very day, she thought it was some miracle from the young man. Later on, though, she noticed that the bride and groom looked more like they were going to a funeral than a wedding. She asked her niece about it, but only got a vague answer. The ceremony itself was simple and quiet, just as modest as the couple seemed to want. Jorge found a priest he knew at the Alcázar to officiate, with Andrade as best man and Donna Antonia serving as matron of honor. Donna Antonia insisted the newlyweds stay in her home after the wedding. But once alone together, Mendonça turned to Margarita and said, his voice calm but distant, "I married you only to protect your reputation. I won't change someone's heart just because life pushes us that way. You'll always have me as a friend. Until tomorrow." With that, he left, leaving Margarita caught between the image she had built of him over the years and the cold words he had just spoken. Theirs was a marriage like no other two people joined by ceremony, but separated by illusion. What should have been the happiest day of their lives became instead one of sadness and isolation. The wedding itself was nothing more than the beginning of a quiet, complete separation. If Margarita had trusted a little more, if Mendonça had believed a little deeper, maybe they could have avoided this bitter ending to what was never really a love story. Some things are better imagined than described, like the pain that filled that first night after the vows. But time, not the mind, decides how we heal. In time, Margarita realized her fears had been unfounded. Her heart softened, and slowly, what had begun as a formality grew into something real. Andrade, meanwhile, remained completely unaware of any of it. Every time he saw Mendonça, he called him the Columbus of love, a joke he repeated endlessly. He had that kind of personality sort of guy who gets one clever idea every few months and then can't stop saying it out loud. To this day, the couple still acts more like fiancés than husband and wife, and somehow, it suits them. As for the other, Andrade dove headfirst into diplomacy, and now looks set to become one of Brazil's brightest stars on the world stage. Jorge stayed true to himself, living the easygoing life he always loved. Donna Antonia, feeling her age more each day, quietly prepares for the final chapter of her life. And Miss Dollar, the woman whose presence had unknowingly sparked so much drama, met a strange fate. One day, as she walked down the street, she was struck by a passing carriage. She passed away not long after. Margaret couldn't hold back a few tears for her noble little dog. The body was buried on the farm. In the shade of an orange tree, over the grave lies a stone with this simple inscription: to Miss Dollar.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Bras Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.